Well, hello, and welcome back to that thing we like to call Curlis Mania, where we talk all things pop, rock, and prog. Tonight we're talking hard rock, and I'd like you, before I do anything else, I got to welcome back to the channel for his third appearance. So becoming quite a regular on this channel, Mr. Peter Jones. How are you, Peter?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Tom. And it's a pleasure to be here as always. Thank you for the
Yes.
consideration.
Oh, of course, of course. We were just talking before we started that been meaning to get Peter back on the channel, and he was gracious enough to kind of do a last minute thing here. So we're and he knows if there's one out band that he knows very well, I would say it's Deep Purple. So I was like, why don't we do Purple? And he's like, yeah, I could do that, and I could do that tomorrow. I can do that in my sleep.
Right.
Um, so so we're doing something a little bit different though. We're doing live albums. So we're gonna do the first two that came out essentially, which is Made in Japan from 1972 against Made in Europe, which was the second official live release from Purple that came out in 76.
76. Yep.
76. November of 76. So, Peter, when was the first time you heard these records?
When they came out.
Right when they came out. Okay,
When
so
they came out.
you bought Made in Japan when it came out?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I was already a huge fan by then. Um, I don't know what the timeline is exactly. Um, but as soon as I saw that it was in the stores,
Mhm.
and it was later here, because it came out in March, late March, almost April of 73,
Mhm.
which, we talk about the timeline. It's kind of interesting because, these were recorded in August of 72. They were supposed to be Japan only and were released in December of 72, but it didn't come out here in the US until later because they were so heavily bootlegged. And the imports from Europe were coming over that the record company said, well, we better get paid for all this. And then they finally released it in the US. You know, there's a long, arduous story about, how it was released and what the conditions were, and we'll save that for another day. But yeah, I got this. And then when I saw the Made in Europe, even though they were broken up at that point, by the time that album came out, I was always checking the bins. And that's a very cool cover.
It
Um,
is.
Great concert shot, and anything that says Deep Purple made in anywhere, you
Yeah.
know, and that's a great album cover, and I jumped all over that one too. So
Yeah.
no, they were pretty much right after they came out. So
Yeah, that is so cool. I agree with you. That cover sucks you in, man. You
that's a
think
great show.
you'd so want to be at that show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I because you're right, because the Made in Europe shows were recorded with sort of the last with Richie Blackmore before he bailed, right? It was
The
like the
last
last,
three, actually, the last three shows. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And we'll do a little detail on that when we get to that album. But yeah,
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 yeah.
the last three shows. Yeah.
Yep. So and then also with Made in Japan, I mean, we're just gonna do a quick. Made in Japan was one of those where they were, touring Japan because they were very popular there.
Yes.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the promoters were like, we need a live, the Japanese record company said we really want
Yes.
a live album or something, right?
Japanese said we want a souvenir for the Japanese fans, Japanese only. And we'll do a very truncated version here. Deep Purple was not interested. The record company, especially, like I said, the Japanese one, pushed on it pretty hard. Purple said, okay, with some conditions. Conditions are we get to record it with our guy, which is Martin Birch. We get to own it, control it, listen to it. If we don't like it, it doesn't come out. And that the stipulation is it is Japan only.
Right.
So they do that. They use the Rolling Stone mobile unit again. And from what I've read, the total outlay was roughly about $3,000. This cost almost nothing.
Amazing.
Martin does it on an 8-track recorder. no overdubs, zero. This is 100% live.
Mhm.
And they were recorded. Richie and Ian weren't even listening to it. They didn't care. All of a sudden they started to hear it back and they're like, we might have something here. And they said, okay, let's do it in Japan. And a couple of weeks later, less than 2 weeks actually, it now comes out in the UK. And it was there until, like I said, the bootlegs and everything started hitting the US. Everybody was grabbing imports and everything, and they finally came out in the US. But it's a collection of 3 dates in August of 72. The 15th and 16th in Osaka, and the 17th in Tokyo. And what's beautiful about that is, and people say, oh, well, there's got to be some kind of overdubs or something. No, there's actually not. And if you look at this, live in Japan, these are a 3-disc set that you can get. If you can find the EMI remastered one, it's unbelievable. It's remastered at Abbey Road. It was all 3 shows in their entirety. So you have all the shows that were used to pool to make Made in Japan. Made in Japan is pooled from all 3 nights. And if you don't think overdubs, and if you think there were overdubs, guess again. The version of Smoke on the Water that is on here is from August 15th, 72. It's the only version of the 3 nights where Blackmore didn't screw up the intro to Smoke on the Water.
Ah,
And I mean screwed up.
okay. All
He's
right.
playing the riff. He misses a fret. He hits an open string, and you can hear Gillan in the back laughing. There's mistakes all through these.
Hmm.
And that was the one of the 3 that worked. And oddly enough, it becomes a top 5 single. It's the definitive version of Smoke on the Water. And at one time, both the studio version from Machine Head and the live version from Made in Japan were both in the charts at the same time. Ridiculous. So,
Crazy. Yeah, I love how they show the dates and the place on the actual release.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that. So cool.
yeah. And it's really kind of cool. And what's kind of interesting is if we just really quickly talk about the timeline in the US, this comes out after Who Do We Think We Are? And
Right.
it would have come out earlier in the US, except they had just released the studio record.
Yeah.
And I can't think that having the live one come out from the previous album, which was by far their biggest, most popular album,
Hmm.
would help sales with Who Do We Think We Are? Because they're competing with each other. I mean, it was January 12th, 73, and March 30th when the live record came out. So it wasn't out very long.
No. No.
And of course, by that time, Gillan had already given his announcement that he was leaving, and a year from then he was gone.
Gone.
So
Yeah.
a lot happening going on.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny when you start thinking about timelines with Deep Purple, there's a lot of tumult that happens pretty quickly. And
Yeah.
and
And just another fun quick note, the inside concert shots from Made in Japan are taken from the Rainbow Theatre in London.
oh, really?
And what's fun is the a young, soon to be guitarist in Def Leppard, Phil Collen, was in the London show when they were taking the pictures. So that's kind of
Interesting. Interesting.
and
That's a
and
great
of
tidbit.
course we know he's an enormous Blackmore and Deep Purple fan. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because as you say, I mean, this was the Machine Head tour, and Machine Head
right,
really kind of put them into the stratosphere as far as, I mean, it was a very popular record at the time, and they were such a great live band, as you're saying. People knew that they were a killer live band, and they had the bootlegs were selling like crazy because people wanted a live record from this band,
right,
you know.
yeah. because they had gone through their first three studio records with only the concerto that had
Right.
any live material on it, and that was before any of those other stuff was written. So
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
they were hungry.
Yeah, no, no, no question, no question. So, so yeah, I mean, so let's start with Made in Japan. What is your, when we go through the track list? I mean, what's interesting is that, I know that this got released multiple times, and there's all
There's a
sorts of
million reissues. Yeah,
reissued a million times, right? With
right,
encores and with extra, and like you said, the entire show, of
right.
all the shows. So, but it's interesting that the original release only had 7 songs on it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy how it's like it's only 7 songs, but it's so anyway. So it starts with Highway Star, which is, I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, look, Deep Purple is the brand that can improv. They're
Yeah.
the live improvisational band. Zeppelin did it to some point, but not nearly to this extent. And Sabbath rarely ever changed their structure of their songs live. They were almost closer to always closer to the studio version. And this is the aspect of Deep Purple that I gravitated to, especially as a young musician, and has entertained me all these years later, is their unbelievable ability to improv and just extend. And some people don't like extended versions. All of these are substantially longer than their studio versions, except interestingly enough, Highway Star is almost exactly like it is on the studio version structure wise.
Yeah,
That's
certain songs are, but not on
that's
every. Yeah.
yeah, in Smoke on the Water as well.
Hmm.
But they certainly take the rest of them and extrapolate into a lot of different places. Look, Machine Head is a brilliant album, and I don't think it's far-fetched to say that the thing about Machine Heads is it takes the best tracks that they did and turns them into the definitive versions. We've got a band that is just absolutely in its prime. Highway Star is just an unrelenting, it's the great driving song. It's just speed, power, energy. Richie plays one of the most iconic solos in rock history.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It has influenced everybody,
Hmm.
and John's solo is crazy good. It's
Hmm.
got classical influences all through it. They play unison sections. And we've got my favorite drummer of all time, Mr. Ian Pace, who's just on another planet here.
Yeah.
So much power and energy and drive and creativity and unlimited technique and chops. And we have to just say this. I just went through the whole scenario, a mobile unit with an 8-track player. This is one of the greatest sounding records of all time for me.
Sounds so good.
The drums are just in the middle of your living room.
Hmm.
You can hear them ringing, and the bass drums got so much boom to it, and the
Yeah.
snare is this glorious Buddy Rich like crack to it, and the cymbals are super clean, and there's no processing, there's no noise gating, no
No,
nothing.
so pure. It's so pure.
And you can, how do you? And this is one of those, hey, sometimes less works better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with a band that knew what they were doing, and Martin, who's a genius,
Hmm.
this is just great. Gillen is amazing. His
Yeah.
vocals are strong as hell, even though he was under the weather
Oh,
for
he
the
was.
episode. Yeah, he
Yeah.
had a little chest cold, which is
God,
insane
can't
because
tell.
he's nuts.
Yeah.
But everything about this is just a powerhouse. It's just from top to bottom, the perfect opening track.
Hmm.
And it just says, okay, we're here.
That's
Take no prisoners. And of course, this time they were also the loudest band in the world.
right.
So I
Right.
can only imagine the impact of what this felt like in about the 22nd row in the center with this firing off right into your raw head.
I mean, I can't imagine because I get excited listening to the recording. I mean, I
Yeah.
was, I was like, I had it. I was telling telling Peter that I was just, just wanted to brush up. I know this record pretty well, but I wanted to listen to it again before we did this.
Right.
And I had it cranked up in the car, and I mean, turned it out. You can't listen to Deep Purple quietly. You got to
No.
crank it up. It's like
Mhm.
Led Zeppelin. You got to crank it, and it's just interesting how it starts. It's kind of like, you just hear a little bit of organ, a little bit of, here or there, and it seems
Kind
like
of line checking.
yeah, it's like they're just doing like little, just like it sounds like they're just kind of fooling around for a minute, and then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, Ian gets a
Yeah.
and he kind of he's got the train going, and then all of a sudden, bam now, and it's like a jet plane goes. It's like
Yeah.
it's insane,
Yeah. And
insane.
what's interesting about the recording that as it came out, that the Live in Japan I was showing you corrects, is if you go back and listen, Richie is in the wrong channel.
Okay.
They were in the wrong panning. The Live in Japan fixes it and turns it back the other direction. So Richie's in the left on Made in Japan. The correction puts him in the right. So as you're facing the stage, he's on stage left and he would be on your right hand side as you're watching. And I think that's kind of a cool thing that they fixed. But you never notice it when you're listening to it because they're panned so cleanly.
Mhm.
But you instantly find out how brilliant John Lord is at both
Yeah.
comping, playing underneath what Richie's doing, and their ability to listen. And I've always said they've got classical education. Lord is a classical genius.
Mhm.
Richie loves classical music. They are jazz-like improvisational players. They have blues skills. And, I've always said Ian Pace is that direct link between Buddy Rich and rock drumming in the late 60s. He's that guy.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and they had everything. They could just do everything.
And like you said, pace with the power and the swing. I mean, that's what's just people don't talk about Ian Pace enough. The guy is like, you listen to this record and you're like, this guy is killing it the whole album.
And that is the snare drum sound that I have tried to use and emulate with everything I've ever done in my drumming career playing live rock.
Yeah,
I just think it's the most glorious snare drum sound.
it is. So
So
sweet.
clean and just so crisp and cracky with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
huge 26-inch bass drum that Bonham and Carmine and all those guys were using back in the day.
yeah,
But
yeah,
he's just a different kind of player. And like you said, he swings like crazy.
yeah. He just don't you have like a Pace kit, like a Ludwig, like
I have an exact replica of the drum kit that's on the album cover.
so cool. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
I love it.
And my first child's named Ian. You
Oh my God, I
start
love
start to
it.
put the pieces together
Yeah,
here, folks.
I'm starting. I'm slow, but I'm putting it together.
Ian's a
But yeah. So what about Child in Time? What's your take on that?
masterpiece,
Yeah, yeah,
and again, there's some who don't care for it.
right. I've
But
heard it a lot. People that don't like it.
this is a different animal live.
Hmm.
And it just shows the incredible range of both dynamic and compositional and performance. This starts out so brilliantly gentle.
Right,
And that was the thing about Deep Purple. You're the loudest band in the world, but that really doesn't do anything if all they do is bludgeon you.
right, right.
Well, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah,
They have light and shade, dark, light. They go soft, blow your head off,
yeah.
everything in between. And
Mhm.
that makes the louder parts more impactful and the softer parts more dramatic. It's just
Absolutely.
great musicianship.
Yeah, yeah,
And, it starts out, and as soon as Pacey comes in and starts grooving underneath the ooze,
yeah,
oh
yeah,
God,
yeah.
it's the greatest foundation to play over. It just is. Oh,
It's like soft butter on toast, man.
oh, it's like, oh
Yeah,
my God. And Gillen's voice just goes from strength to strength to strength. The volume keeps raising, and all of a sudden, you know,
Yeah.
like, oh my God. And then what happens, in my opinion, is one of the great Deep Purple moments captured on tape. Richie's solo when they go to this up-tempo section is a
Hmm.
masterclass. It
Yeah.
is just everything that makes Richie Richie. He's
Right.
so melodic, and he even structures it. He starts out with a theme, and he even ends the solo with a similar theme. And again, he's got these riffs and they're running, and you can tell that they're improvising, and that John was so good at it, he could hear what Richie was doing. And if Richie would repeat it, John would play it back, either unison or he'd harmonize to it.
Yes. Yes.
And then Ian is picking up the rhythm part of it, accenting it like a big band drummer, and now they're just going off. And they
Yeah.
have these little connectors that they just know, I'm going to go until I do this. And that'll take me into the next section.
Yeah.
And they go to that great, beautiful, and then and the crowd's like, do, do,
It's like
do,
pin drop. Yeah. Yep.
and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, and here comes again. They
Yeah.
build it back up, and then they get that ending. Da, da, na, 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 and you're like, oh my God. Gillen over the top of it, and it's just goosebumps
It's total.
everywhere.
It's
It
total.
is so awesome. And you're
It's
like,
like
okay,
what other band can do this? It's like nobody.
no. And with all respect to Zeppelin and Sabbath and everything, you mentioned it. They were the ultimate live band,
Hmm.
that there were no weaknesses
No.
live.
No.
Robert Plant could struggle every once in a while. Ozzy couldn't remember words. He didn't know what he was doing, which is why you never got a proper live Sabbath album during that 6 album run.
Man, that's a great point. There never was. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. And Zeppelin really didn't either. Song Remains the Same was an attempt.
Yeah.
And, the band will tell you, and most, once you've heard other things, will tell you, oh, they did a lot better stuff than that.
Yeah. Yeah. They did
Um,
because it came
but
out later. It came out
comes
later.
out
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
But here it was, a perfect, real representation of what Purple was doing in 72. And it's just awe-inspiring. You're just like,
Yeah.
the band is so good. It's almost unmeasurable.
And to your point, it's they're at their peak. I mean, this is they are at their live peak at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's going on full cylinder, full capacity at this point.
Right.
So, uh,
And both of those tracks were taken from the August 16 Osaka show.
you know,
So, man, all of them, when you listen to all three of them in the live in Japan, it is so great because every show's different.
yeah, yeah,
Their solos are different. Everything, Ian Pace does different fills here and there. And it's just, there's so many new nuggets that you just get exposed to every time you rehear it. And no band was doing that.
yeah,
Nobody could do that like that. So
yeah. Especially at that time, it was like no one was doing that, and like you said, that the fact that they have these little markers where it's like you can tell it's
right,
just you go do your thing for a while until we do that, and then we'll come back. Yeah, that's like so
right.
funny.
It's
Yeah,
like that's the heads up, or Richie will hammer on and he'll put his arm up, and
yeah,
everybody knew where to go. And
yeah, yeah. Crazy.
he said, John Lord used the word dangerous. He
Yeah.
said sometimes it was dangerous on stage. We didn't know where we were going.
We were on the edge of the cliff all the time. Yeah.
But that's exciting.
That's fun though. That's fun.
There
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
When you're that good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you
So
can sense the
besides
audience,
you,
and the audience can sense it, right? They feel it. So it makes it exciting.
yeah.
So yes, so Smoke on the Water is kicks off side two. I mean,
What can be said? It's
I
the
don't know what to
version
say.
everybody knows.
Right.
You
Right.
know, the solo is perfect. I love that Richie goes first, and you've got that beautiful snare drum behind the solo. He's not even playing a full beat.
Yeah.
And then when John comes in at the end, you're like, oh my God. And Richie's rhythm playing is so precise and machine gun like.
Yeah.
And it's one of the greatest endings of any rock song, the Deep Purple ending. And I have to tell you a quick story. There was a friend of mine I used to do a lot of dinner theater and plays with, keyboard player, bassist. And every time in rehearsals, we would try to find a spot to throw in a Deep Purple Smoke on the Water ending. So
Yeah.
we would be doing My Fair Lady, and we'd just be holding something, and I'd go, and we would laugh. Nobody knew what we were doing, and we'd go, we got another one. And we
Yes.
used to put a
Yes.
Deep Purple ending in. But,
Guys would
that
crack up.
ending just builds when John and Richie,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
the crowd goes nuts.
Everyone erupts. Yeah, exactly.
It's one of the greatest songs ever written,
Love
and
it.
the performance is masterful.
Yeah. And then the mule. I mean,
Oh, this
again.
is my least favorite on the studio version
Hmm.
because there's no solo in it. It's versus the rest of the songs that are on there, I don't think stands up as well.
Right.
But of course, as a young drummer, when I heard this, it was game over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And still, all these decades later, I can go back and listen to all these different sections and go, well, that's Buddy Rich, that's Max Roach, that's
Hmm.
Joe Murillo from Brubeck, yeah, and that's you, Ian, and
Right.
it's
Right.
just,
A lot of
and
jazzy influences for
oh,
sure.
it is a jazz solo.
Hmm.
It really is.
Yeah.
Power and energy and these beautifully huge, reverberant cannon-like drums
Yep.
that are just so clean. You can hear his sticks coming off the heads.
Yeah.
And how,
Yeah.
how that happens in a place that big with an 8-track and it's just a couple mics and it's just like, I don't know how
Just
they do
shows
it.
what a great player he is, though. That's you don't
It's
you know
yeah, and look, drum solos are an acquired taste. I don't begrudge anybody who's like, I'm not into drum solos, but
like I get it. I get it. Yeah.
yeah, but all these years later, he's flying along, and of course he does a couple signature things real fast. One, he does the buzz roll that comes down to almost nothing. That's Buddy, and then
Hmm.
Buddy starts the bass drum,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
then he builds the snare on top of it, and then he goes boom, 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 and off he
Yeah.
goes, and you're like, oh my God, awesome, just
Just
awesome.
awesome.
I
I mean, Ian Pace, man.
can't
Ian.
skip it. No.
Yeah. Awesome. And then I mean, Strange Kind of Woman is pretty straightforward. I dig this version. I like it though. I like it quite a bit.
This might be my favorite side of the album,
Yeah.
uh, between
Agreed.
Strange Kind and Lazy,
Yeah.
and some people don't like shuffles. If you don't like shuffles, there's a lot of Deep Purple you're not going to care for because
Oh, I love shuffles. Oh,
it's
come
their
on.
signature rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maiden's got the gallop,
Right.
Sabbath's got the doomy,
Yes. Yeah.
purple swings, and
Yeah.
you shuffle, and it's just got the greatest feel ever. And we get this gorgeous interplay between Richie and Gillan, the
Right.
back and forth. But when you're listening to that next time, listen to Ian Pace underneath. There's no bass, no keys.
Hmm.
He is putting on a clinic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're
Yes.
doing their
Yes.
thing up here, and I'm not even listening to what they're doing. What the hell is Ian doing under there?
Oh, you mean during the whole like that stuff?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Go
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
and listen to what Ian
Yeah.
Pace is doing. It's
Right.
just so perfect. And
Yes.
then when they come out of it, and then the
Yeah.
scream at the end from Gillan is epic. And
Yeah, I
then
mean Gillen's vocals too. I mean he does a lot of screaming, but he it's so great. It's like, oh God, that guy's so
yeah,
powerful.
Yeah, and
you know?
clean and always on pitch. And what's so funny is if you look at the front cover of this, if you look way down here, it looks like his monitors are like two Shure PA cabinets. You know, those old, that's it.
I
There
see
are
them,
no
yes.
wedges on stage, nothing.
That's crazy.
How can you
How
hear
can you
when the
hear
band's
yourself?
117 decibels on stage?
Yeah.
He's never out of key.
No, he's not. He's not.
Crazy.
He's not. I mean, that's how
Insane.
good he was. He was just that good.
Yeah,
Uh, wow.
that's
But
nuts.
you know what I was going to say though is the one thing on the re-listen recently, the one song that really like I for I forgot the version was so great is Lazy.
Yes,
I love Lazy on this.
yes,
It's
yes.
killer.
John's intro is super cool,
Yeah.
and you really get a sense of how monstrously huge that Hammond was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
now he affectionately called it the Beast,
Right.
and that's pretty
Of course.
apropos
Yeah.
because you just, right before he does the Louie Louie riff,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, he goes, and then he just brings it back.
Yes. Yes.
And you're like, oh my God.
Dude,
It's a
it's
jazz
like, oh,
tune.
it's awesome.
It's a jazz tune.
I just like, oh, oh, I just love,
Nuts.
I love this version of it. I love
Oh,
it.
so powerful.
Can't get enough.
No, I agree completely.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, of course,
Awesome.
then it ends with Space Trucking as the last track is, the
Yeah,
whole
nearly 20 minutes long.
20 minutes.
And,
Yeah.
and it was so cool when I first heard it. I was trying to figure out as a young musician, young drummer, what Ian Pace was doing underneath that solo section. And of
Hmm.
course, Glover is just doing E octaves.
Yep.
And then, of course, when you're in E, you can play
You could,
anything.
yeah, you can go everywhere. Yeah.
It's so easy to solo over, and all he does is just takes 4/16 notes, does two in his right hand, two on his snare drum, with his bass drum on quarter notes.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's it.
All
But he's
right.
swinging them.
He's swinging it. Yeah.
Instead of it's a and you're like, he just goes. And
Yeah.
then it breaks down again, not unlike Strange Kind of Woman,
Hmm.
when Ian Pace, when Richie starts doing all his volume swells that
Yeah. Yeah.
sound like a cello because Richie loves the cello. And he's just, you can hear a pin drop.
Just masterful. Just,
And it's just, and
yeah.
all of a sudden, just chaos. And then, and they just go right back into it.
Yeah.
You'd have to be shell shocked to hear that live, and just the
No.
wave of volume and intensity just had to be like bathing in the sun.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that you're recording, that you're recording this, and I mean, I don't even know if they even knew they were being recorded, but
Oh, they knew. Yeah, it was.
did they
Yeah,
know? Okay.
they'd set it all up ahead of time. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. But I mean, just the fact that they can just stop in a dime and they do all these, oh, it's amazing.
But
Yeah.
here's the key thing about that, and anybody of us who's done recordings before, you get what they call red light fever. That red light goes on, and you're like,
Oh
stiffen
God.
up.
Yeah, exactly.
They never thought anything was ever going to come of this.
Right.
They're
Right.
like, well, okay, fine, you record it, we'll appease you, we'll do whatever. And they just went out and said, F it, we're going to go play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
happened to catch it versus, oh, we really want to do this. Let's make sure we get it right and not make any
Right.
mistakes.
Yeah.
Screw that.
Screw it. And they had last, as you said earlier, they had last right of refusal on it. They could have kooshed it if they wanted
Yeah,
to. So, They
Right.
didn't care. So
Nothing to lose here.
yeah, yeah,
They had
exactly.
just had a new record. It's ready to come out.
Right.
They're in no lose scenario here whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
no
Yeah.
proper ending.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
kind of
Except like,
and the crowd just is like,
the crowd's like,
and you're like, oh my God. You're like, what was that?
unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, just I
Insane.
think they're just stunned at how great this band is. I just like
Yeah.
sitting
I
there.
mean, if, fly on the wall, there's, a handful of shows that if you could go back in time, Peabody and Sherman,
Yeah,
that you could put yourself there to experience live. You give me any of these 3 dates in August of 72,
yeah,
and I can die a happy man just seeing 5 minutes of this.
yeah. I keep thinking, oh, maybe I'd like the 16th, but then wait, Lazy was the 17th in Tokyo. Ah, bummer.
Well, you haven't heard the other two versions yet.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So
So
that's
an absolute live masterpiece. I mean, what could,
it is.
I don't know what else to say.
No,
This is
you're
just
right.
a killer live record. I mean, if you don't know this album or don't have it or don't own it, you got to run out and go get it immediately. Or
Yeah, I
go
mean
listen to it.
it's earned its reputation, but it's maintained its reputation simply because it literally delivers
Yeah.
everything that people say about it. So
Yeah. So let's move on. Let's move on to Made in Europe,
absolutely.
which is, you know, Mach 3, right?
Yeah.
Recorded not in Japan, but in Australia, or sorry, Austria, Germany, and France in
Yep.
1975.
Yep.
Apparently most of it was in Germany. Most of this stuff, I think.
Yeah, I was having a hard time. It's not clearly as defined as to what came from where. And unlike Made in Japan, Made in Europe is heavily edited.
Yes. Yes.
There
Yeah.
are clear
Yeah.
overdubs in this. They redid parts. They've taken intros from one show with a performance for the same song, but from a different show. So they're not lining up from, they're not from the same show, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Um, and, a quick synopsis, not unlike what is available on Made in Japan now, these Deep Purple Overseas Limited has done a huge series of live releases. They have the Graz show that is available in its
Hmm.
entirety.
There we go.
That's one
Okay.
of the 3 dates. What's beautiful about that is that it's got the song Gypsy
Nice.
live, which is just stunning. And the Paris show is available.
Yep.
Same set list, um, but two totally different but absolutely spectacular shows. And there's a rumor that the German one was to have been released in its entirety, but that has never materialized yet.
Okay. Okay.
So the April 7th in Paris was Richie's last show.
Okay. There we go. Okay.
And
All right.
there's also from the Burn tour, this came out later, live in London. And as far as the Burn era, this is an absolute highlight. This is
Okay.
stunning. So,
Awesome.
but the other
Awesome.
ones are directly related here to Made in Europe. So,
Yes, absolutely. No question. Those are yeah, these are the shows they've taken these from.
yeah,
And it's interesting, you're right. You can tell, it's what drives me crazy. At the end of the record after Stormbringer, you can tell there's a looped crowd.
yeah,
It's kind of annoying
yeah.
because
It's they say there's some fan who's whistling, and
yes,
you can keep hearing that same whistle.
exactly. It's exactly the same every time. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
like,
you're like,
okay.
okay,
Come on now, people. We're not going to fall for that. No. But you're right. That's a huge, I would say that's number one difference between these two.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but that being said, there's still a lot of great performing going on this record. There's still a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. And, as spectacular as Made in Japan is on its style and its delivery, Made in Europe has its own really strong attributes. First of
Right.
all, I will say categorically to my ears, Richie is way more aggressive here.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
guitar has perhaps my favorite tonality of his entire career, except maybe in 77, 78 when he was live with Rainbow. But his guitar's got so much bite, edge, and distortion and power. Oh, it is just
It does.
absolutely glorious.
Yeah.
And Ian Pace is, it started with the Made in Japan era, and he is now, through Burn, Stormbringer, and well into Come Taste the Band, he's the busiest, most energized, and powerful of his career. And Ian's drumming on here is absolutely stunning.
Absolute. No question. No
Just,
question.
so I mean, it's this version of Burn is not unlike what Highway Star did to Made in Japan.
Hmm.
It's the quintessential version. It is just full flamethrower, and it's got so much drive and energy. And I have heard this a zillion times because it's just so good. And
Yeah.
Glenn Hughes' bass adds a different kind of tonality.
Hmm.
And he's a bit busier than
Playing a
Roger.
Rickenbacker. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I mean, they both used a Rick. Glover played a Rick all through that
Oh, that's right.
72
That's
era,
right. That's right. Yeah.
but different tonality.
Yeah.
And like I said, Glenn was much busier
He
and played
was.
a lot higher up on the strings. Glenn was a foundation. I mean, Roger was a foundational player,
Right.
much more closer to the nut.
Yeah.
He didn't often go up high on his neck.
Right.
Um, the vocals, I will say, are good, not necessarily great. Coverdale versus the studio versions, he's not up in the same registers most of the time. He's altering for live, which is okay.
Yeah.
Um,
He kind of ditches to the lower note a lot. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Glenn doesn't have any limits, so
Right. Right.
he can do whatever he wants.
Right.
But the live solo on Burn from Blackmore is one of my
Oh,
favorite solos of his of all
lights
time.
out. Lights out. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
reminded me so much more of Clapton during Cream.
Right. Right. Oh, good call. Yeah.
It's so melodic. It's
Yeah.
just stupid good.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow. I mean, so this really doesn't have to apologize to be somebody's, understudy or secondary brother.
Right.
This is a powerful, powerful start to this record. I
Oh,
agree.
absolutely, absolutely. And Mistreated, I enjoy, but it's I think it's isn't didn't they play Mistreated a ton? I mean, wasn't this a song that just played on the set list for years?
Yeah, Richie revives it. He does it with Ronnie.
Yeah.
And no offense, DC, but once Ronnie starts singing something,
Yeah. It's hard.
uh,
It's tough to sing.
and I know my friends
Right.
who are very big DC guys, and they're like, Ronnie's great, but DC owns this track.
Yeah.
And he even pulled it out in White Snake, and so this track has had a long, long history.
Yeah.
And but was kind of a sign of things to come with Rainbow, especially live. It's got a lot of tie-ins. It breaks down into the blues section. It breaks down before it ever gets back to the track.
Hmm.
It's long. It's almost 12 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah.
where, you're like, hey, you could have played, how many more songs? And again, it's a truncated version because, the Gypsy, and even on the Parish show, they do a version of Going Down, which is pretty cool. Um, so you're like, well, it's two albums versus one. I don't know the circumstances. I mean, they weren't talking to each other at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Richie was
Yeah.
he had already made his intentions. He's out of there.
He was already 1 foot out the door at this point.
Yeah, but you know what though? To his credit, and he's done it a couple times now.
Mhm.
You would never know that by his playing.
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't.
Because, as someone said in something I read, he said, an aloof Richie is sometimes an aloof Richie. And, we've seen shows like that where he doesn't even play solos. He
Yeah.
just grinds his guitar against his amps or does pick slides and just acts like a crazy man.
Right.
They
Right.
said, but an angry Blackmore is an
It's good.
exciting Blackmore. And look, he was about to showcase his own band. He wasn't about to put something out that says, hey, Richie may be kind of losing it a bit.
Yeah. Good point.
He's like a guy who's a free agent going into his contract year. He's like, I got to look really great.
Got to
So I'm
play
so,
well. Yeah.
he
Exactly.
just kicks ultimate ass here.
He does.
He's so
And you're
good.
right. His tone has improved from
Yes.
72. His
It's
tone is,
edgier,
yeah.
fuller. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is incredible to get that kind of thickness out of a single coil Strat.
Yeah, exactly. Out of a Strat. Exactly. It doesn't sound like a Strat.
No,
It
I don't
just
know
doesn't.
how in the world you do that.
Yeah.
But then when he goes to the delicate sections, it really pays off in spades because, he can go to the neck pickup and roll off some of the high end and just do these beautiful, delicate, little classical interludes and things that he especially did in Rainbow that really cut through cleanly with a single coil.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
when you hear it, and what you hear is you hear it twice. They do the intro, bah, and you hear rock and roll, and Richie kicks in his pickup selector,
Yes.
and it's coming.
You
And
can
then in
hear it.
Mistreated, you hear it again
Hmm.
when he
Right.
comes out of the soft section,
Yeah.
and then they go into the section towards the end. So that's fun. I like when you get that. And Sabbath has some live shows back in the day where you'd hear like the beginning of, Symptom of the Universe. You'd hear Tony, you go, and then you already know it's feeding
It's
back
coming.
until he
It's
hits.
coming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that stuff is glorious to me. I
Yeah.
love when that happens.
It's a
There's so
live
much
show, man. That's a live.
there's so much energy behind it, and it translates so beautifully to the recording, and I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, and I love Lady Double Dealer on this
I do
record.
too.
Oh, I mean, I like the song on the studio record, and then
Oh
this
yeah,
one kicks ass.
yeah. It's a very aggressive riff.
Yeah.
This is way more reminiscent of, when he was riffing like Rat Bat Blue and tracks like that earlier with Deep Purple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's just and that perfect kind of Highway Star chugging underneath from Richie.
Yeah.
And David delivers a great vocal
I was gonna
on
say
this.
that this is his
Yeah,
best vocal.
yeah, I think it is too.
He does the Lady Double Dealer. Yeah.
Na 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 na
He's
na na na
killing it.
na.
He's killing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the solos are great. And I've always loved Richie's vibrato. It's just epic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shades of the greatest violinists of all time. It's just milky and smooth, and I could listen to him play forever. And Pacey's going nuts.
Yeah, he's killing it on this
Oh,
track. Oh my
just
God. I mean, he's
yeah,
killing it again. Pace he's just like it's like a given. He's gonna kill it.
yeah,
He always does.
yeah. It's
You
just
know.
awesome.
So yeah, so You Fool Number One is kind of like the sort of the long track on this album, on this another long one.
Yeah, this is another one that's kind of a collection of various parts.
Hmm.
Of course, that intro drum riff is
Oh,
just
with
one
the
of the
cowbell, it's
one of the, it's just
it's almost like
and
Immigrant
then
Song on steroids.
yeah, and what's so cool is that during the verses he does the cymbal choke.
Yeah.
You fool no
Uh,
one. He's doing it live, and you're just like, it's just so
and it's
freaking
and
cool
it's like
that he's,
butter. It's like butter.
he
Yeah.
just comes off the pattern, grabs it, and goes right
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. So great.
And Lord's
So,
intro is really cool.
yeah.
What he just Hava Nagila, he
Yeah,
does
he
on it,
does.
right?
Yes, exact. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but then just he's just that, and not unlike where he's doing in Lazy, you can feel all the foundation under him just start to thicken up, and the amps start to shake, and
That's
you
just
just
yeah.
and then and when
Yeah.
Richie comes in, this is the most aggressive I've ever heard him.
Yeah.
And the solo is brilliant on the studio record, but
Mhm.
here he's on another level.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
is again another solo from Richie that is just way up on my favorites of anything he's ever done.
Yeah.
And it
It's digging
unfortunately it
in.
just kind of comes to this kind of lull where he's noodling for a long time. They go to
Hmm.
the blues thing, and of course he takes that with him to Rainbow. He
Yeah.
does that, and then once they finally get back to it, you're like, oh, okay, great. And then we've got another really great drum solo.
Yeah.
But again, for people who aren't into drum solos, you're kind of like, yeah, okay.
Right, right. I think some people, I
Yeah.
think you lose some people during, because like especially recorded. I think live when you see it, you're like into it, but with the recorded part doesn't translate
Yeah.
as.
Yeah. And especially if you're going to have a limited number of tracks on a single LP, that drum solo takes up a good 3 to 5 minutes.
It does, yeah, it does.
There's easily another whole song
Another song
that
there, yeah,
that you could have done. And that's always been the knock,
yeah,
right? I
right,
mean, you
yeah,
just, you like those bands that you get and you're like, oh my God, there's like 19 songs. And you're like, oh my God, this is awesome.
yeah, yeah.
And it's like, oh, how many are there? Five.
I've
Well, really like four and a half.
right,
Between the extended stuff and Mistreated and all the extra stuff that's in You'd Fool No One, you're like, well, there's kind of five.
kind of. No, I'm with you. I'm with you. That's, I mean, that's the weakness of this. It's like, okay, when you have a double album, you can stretch out a little more, but with
Yeah.
single record, not as much.
Yeah,
Uh,
you don't. Yeah, it was kind of overkill. Not that
yeah,
I'm sad that it's there,
right, right. I get
but
it.
when you listen to the other shows straight through that have more tracks and everything, you're like, yeah, that would have kind of been a little bit better.
Yeah,
But they weren't going to repeat anything.
right, right.
There's no Mark II stuff on here.
No.
And most of that pretty much disappeared. Once Burn started, they would occasionally do Highway Star. Smoke on the Water was there because they had to,
Hmm.
but they also kind of changed the arrangement a little bit where they would do, it's not We All Came Out as They Came Out.
Yeah,
David was changing the ownership of it. And then
right.
they do harmonies on the last verse. And, so it was a different kind of thing. And then they do Space Trucking,
Mhm.
which just allowed them to kind of go nuts. And of course, the version on Cal Jam is just epic.
Yeah, it is. It
Which
is.
he blows his crap up,
Goes
and
nuts.
yeah, just they will go crazy. But that really doesn't matter if it's Glenn or David, because it's really the three of them with a bass player, and the key elements are John and Ian and Richie.
Right, right.
So.
Yeah, yeah.
But and then the version of Stormbringer are very strong,
Killer, killer.
very very
Yeah,
strong.
love it.
And there's no shortage of awe-inspiring moments here.
Hmm.
Let's not pretend that I listened to Made in Japan 1,000 times and this one 10.
Hmm.
No, there were
Right.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of listens to Made in Europe. I had a longer time with Made in Japan, of course,
Sure,
but
sure.
this is as a standalone. Now, all these years later, I prefer the individual shows.
Hmm. Right,
Um,
right.
but not knowing that at the time, Made in Europe was a heavy, heavy rotation
Yeah,
in my Deep Purple listening. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there was no, this is not a slouch of a live record, not by any
No,
stretch.
no, not at all. And it puts a lot of other live bands' albums to shame.
Yeah,
As flawed as it is with all the
right.
things that we've pointed out, because just the playing is just too good,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's great material.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the track listing is a little wonky. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just quibbling, right? The track listing's a little bit, like you said, you could have added maybe two more songs to this if you had just truncated. And then also, the Glenn Hughes, I love the guy to death, but he's like a little busier and he's going
Yep.
up the neck more. And I kind of, I don't know, for some reason maybe I prefer the closer to the nut, Roger Glover kind of stuff. I don't know.
Well, two totally different players, two different styles. I think Glenn gave Ian a little more permission to stretch out a bit.
Hmm.
Um, but you can't all be the shining star. Somebody has to step back.
Yeah.
And that was Rogers.
Roger,
He
that's what he
was
did. Yeah. That's what.
Roger was a skiffle player. It was Lonnie Donegan. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
foundation,
Yeah.
root
Found it
fifth,
exactly.
root fifth, maybe a third
Foundational.
every
Yes.
once in a while, root
Yeah.
fifth octave, root fifth octave, you know.
Yeah.
Glenn was blue
Yeah.
all over the place.
And sometimes on occasion, again, this is just once in a long while, there are times in this on this record where it's like you said, you got two virtuosos already in John Lord and Richie Blackmore, and they're going all over the place. And then when you have the bass player going all over the place too, it's like, whoa, this is becoming a little much, like slow.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, I'm like I said, I'm quibbling here. I still think it's a great live record. They're still a great live band. I love the two vocals. I mean, having the two vocal thing is really cool.
Totally different than
You
Mark II.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to have an option to go back and forth is really, really great. And of course, it was a shame that the last concerts in Japan and everything that was recorded with Bolin are pretty kind of unlistenable.
Oh, really?
Um,
Yeah.
because Tommy was just a mess.
Yeah, he
Um,
was. He was. Yeah.
and John is really having to struggle to keep everybody tight because he was
Keep
kind
it
of the glue.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Ian's brilliant. He's playing his ass off,
Right.
but focus of purpose and intention and will and everything goes a
Exactly.
long, long way.
Dedication, talent, chemistry. There's a lot
Yeah.
of things that go along with it, so that I think that's a great way to end this. I think that's the ultimate. I mean, that's what we're listening to when we listen to Deep Purple live.
Yeah.
And these guys have it in spades, and I think that it's pretty obvious with this battle that we've both chosen. I think we've both chosen Made in Japan here because it's just such a classic.
I,
However,
I can't I can't start the show with Made in Japan's my favorite album of all
right,
time because our show's over.
yeah, exactly, but
But it is.
this is no
It by
slouch, though. No slouch.
No, it's not. It's not. But Made in Japan's my favorite record of all time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's understandably so. I think that's you're not alone in that. I think there's a lot of people that feel that way.
Yeah.
And it's just a killer live record. There's no doubt. It's up.
Lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, they caught it, and like as you said, which I love about it the most is that it's so raw. It's so raw, and it's a moment in time caught.
Yeah.
You know.
It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah, the best. So we'll just end it there, and we'll say, if you stayed with us this long, we really appreciate it. You must be a dedicated Deep Purple fan. So what do you guys think? I mean, is it just obvious that Made in Japan is the one? Maybe some people will say, I don't know. I love Made in Europe. I grew up with Made in Europe, and that's my album. Like, I don't know. Who knows? So, and I couldn't really, fault you for that. If that's what
Nope.
you love, it's okay, you know. And maybe
No,
people like,
if you came in with Burn and Stormbringer and DC and Glenn are your guys, that makes sense to me.
got no problem with that.
No, no, because like I said, you still got the trio.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And all of that's gonna be there for you to enjoy and dig into, and they don't fail to deliver on any level.
Yeah, they don't. And so that's it. That's it, people. I hope you enjoyed it. Peter, thank you so much for joining me
Thank you,
again.
Tom.
You're always welcome on this channel.
Thank you,
Wealth
sir.
of knowledge. And we will always, as I always have to say, hit like and subscribe if you like what you see. It helps the channel. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on Curless Mania. So thanks. See ya.